Emily Landau, Dr. Emily Landau of the INSS, I want to start with you. When we say sticking points, and that's the thing that we heard both in the report and both from Chico Menashe out in Lausanne, to me, it seems like the sticking points constantly change. The question of whether nuclear, what exists, what is being shipped to Russia, if it's being shipped to Russia, the time frame that will be allowed to Iran to pursue safe nuclear capability. Where does that stand at this point? Does it really matter? Because you seem to disagree with all of this.
No, you're absolutely right. The sticking points keep changing. We keep hearing that something else is, holding up the agreement. And you rightly mentioned the issue of shipping out Iran's vast stockpile of enriched uranium. This is something that it seemed to have been already agreed upon. Suddenly the Iranians are saying that they're not willing to ship this out, that it's incorrect, that they were not understood correctly. I don't know exactly how they're explaining this. And of course, all of our assessments are always being made with this kind of, on the one hand, we have all the leaks that hit the media. On the other hand, we don't know the full details. So it's a little difficult to make the assessments. But what we can clearly, I think, say is that there's clear indications that the P5+1 are making more and more concessions to Iran. And in terms of the negotiation dynamic, and remember, this negotiation is going to continue for another 3 months, and everything that happens in the dynamic will feed into the continuation of the negotiation. So if Iran is noticing that when they are, holding out, they're intransigent and not budging from their positions, and the other side starts moving towards them and making concessions, that this is a dynamic that will likely continue. And this is very dangerous in terms of, getting the deal that the P5+1 keeps saying that they want. It looks right now that this is leading to what we could definitely call a bad nuclear deal. I mean, nobody's even talking about the military dimensions, which just a few days ago, it seemed, according to media reports, that is now off the agenda. How can you have a comprehensive deal when you don't have the military aspects of Iran's nuclear program squarely on the table?
And it's not
and the verification regime, what's going on with that? We kept hearing for the past year, especially from the Americans, don't worry. This deal will be based on very strong and comprehensive verification and inspection measures. And that actually needs to mean any place, any time. Now we're hearing that that's not what's going to happen. So all of these issues that we know are very problematic aren't even on the table right now when we hear about the last sticking point.
The last sticking point, and I have to, remind people, we are talking about rumors because, as we said, it's information that's being leaked to the media that we're all trying to make sense of, and we actually don't know. Before we touch on, the Israeli component, which is very strong, a strong player, at least in the, in the reports with the Israeli Prime Minister in this one. Ali, I'm asking you, when it comes to Iran and all this conflicted information, is there anything in Arab reports that's coming out from that side, be it about the sticking points or what it is that Iran exactly wants? And I'm assuming that's the lifting of sanctions immediately, like that.
Yeah, well, I think that what Dr. Landau said, it is correct, because there are many sides, even in the P+1, there is no unanimity about the agreement, and the information that is leaked, it depends on the interest of every major actor within the 5+1, and of course in the Iranian side, and the circles that is after, which is Israel and the Arab states. So yeah, we're not talking about the 5 permanents plus Germany that has everybody agreed on everything. There is the United States, there is Germany and Britain in a second block, and of course there is France.
France in a different type of an opinion.
Exactly,
right?
And Russia and China are, I can assume about, from what I'm hearing from the Arab sides, that are more pushing towards an agreement that takes into consideration most of the demands of the Iranian. Now, what the Arab world is saying, Laurent Fabius said in this in his statement towards the transparency of the mechanism of the transparency, and this is a crucial point. The Iranians are bargaining between the inspection system and between whether they will or not agree to ship the already enriched uranium. We are talking about almost more than 8,000 tons of uranium to Russia. But this won't be the obstacle if the Iranians are receiving the lifting of the sanctions, if they agreed upon the rhythm of the lifting of the sanctions, and they will accept at the end of the day to ship the tons of uranium that they already enriched. The question is, and this is the crucial point, whether or are they going to collaborate in the inspection system, and this is the big question that in the Arab world everybody is raising. And they said that the experience with Iran is that with every agreement they signed or did not sign, they always found a way to hide their real activity.
To the activity. We're also joined from Washington, D.C. by Rebecca Shimoni-Stoyle. Rebecca, good morning to you.
Morning.
No, you're joining the discussion. I hope you heard all of that because I introduced you, but I'm turning to Tal Shalev for a second. Because I think one of the biggest thing on the plate right now is whether, how Israel is, I don't know if it's how Israel is going to react. Let's start with this, and how the United States will react to that. Tal, I'm asking you, because Prime Minister Netanyahu, yet again yesterday, comes out with a statement in front of his cabinet, which of course it comes out on the internet with English subtitles. This is directed towards the world, not necessarily towards his cabinet. If this deal indeed is going to happen, if some type of framework is coming out, what can Netanyahu even do? And doesn't it also destabilize his entire, play over the course of the last month and a half?
Well, the assumption in Israel is that there is going to be a deal signed, some kind of framework deal. It's not clear if it's going to be a public text or just an oral declaration. How binding will it be? But Israel is already preparing for the day after, because this is just a political agreement, and other technicalities, the final comprehensive agreement, there are 3 months more to go till the end of June deadline. So Israel is already preparing for the day after, by something we've heard in the past after the interim deal, by seeking intelligence that will expose violations, Iranian violations of the agreement or Iranian violations of the terms, and B, of course, going to Congress. And it's in a coincidence, or maybe not a coincidence, a coincidental timing. Tomorrow, as the deal might be declared, the House Speaker, John Boehner, will be arriving in Israel. Yesterday, and as we speak, Mitch McConnell is here in Israel. So definitely Israel is building on Congress. And the fact is that if it is a weak deal, a weak agreement that is announced tomorrow, then Congress will have a lot of criticism about it. And Israel is building on Congress that it will be trying to sabotage or jeopardize any agreement that the president will reach.
Trying to achieve. And Rebecca, this question to you, because I think President Obama is most likely expecting some sort of a fight from Congress in the United States, but it seems like too many powers and many powers want this deal to happen. Will Obama, $1 million question, first, it is within his power to not take this agreement to Congress, although he's been urged to do so. So will he do so? And is there the chatter in Washington, as Israel, leaders seem to maintain, that this deal is something that Obama is not going to give up on?
Well, I could answer your question very quickly and say no and yes. But I'll let expand. I think that the Obama administration has made it very clear and continues to stick to its guns on the fact that no, whatever the deal is that will come out of Switzerland this week, most likely, no, Congress will not have an opportunity to review that part of the deal in any meaningful way. Now, of course, the question is what exactly is going to come out. And of course, as Tal mentioned, is it going to be publicly accessible at all? In other words, will Congress get to see the deal? Will there be a transcript? There were rumors over the weekend of a 2 to 3 page written document. Yeah. I don't know if that will play out in the end. And I suppose since it's clear that it's not ready in any case, we'll have to still wait and see. Now, regarding Congress, and what are there voices in Congress that are continuing to kind of voice their opinion, and can they do that in any meaningful way? Well, over the weekend, I think one of the most significant stories that came out of Switzerland here in Washington was reports that the Iranians will be allowed to continue enrichment at the underground facility at Fordo. Now, this is significant in Washington because for months, if not, I think probably months at this point, we've heard that from the perspective of the administration, this is some kind of a red line, that you can't claim to have a civilian, transparent nuclear program if you're enriching in a secret underground facility, that the two don't necessarily go together particularly well. And so we've heard very strong statements up until this month from the administration that this kind of practice is not acceptable for a country that seeks to come in out of the cold on nuclear relations. However, reports came out early this weekend that there was in fact about to be a concession regarding the Fordo plant. Now, if that is the case, that is something that will make some people in Washington, not anybody new unhappy, but people who are already unhappy, it will give them a little bit more ammunition to explain why they think this is a bad deal, and they'll even be able to turn some of the administration's own public words and speeches against them in arguing that the U.S. has really given in more than anybody would have wanted them to.
No, a valid point and shedding lights on that. Thank you, Rebecca. Emily, I see you shaking your head because you have spent I've spent the bulk of my acquaintance with you discussing this specific matter. But when it comes to the underground, you said that there are overall, main issues that are not even being discussed here that people need to remember. Like what?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was shaking my head because, this is not the first red line that the United States had put on the table that is being crossed with regard to the issues that are on the table. No one's talking anymore about Iraq, the heavy water reactor that can produce plutonium. There was talk of reconfiguring this reactor, but it will still be able to produce plutonium just at a reduced rate. So that was a breach of a clear red line that had been on the table. And again, the verification regime, the issue of the PMDs, the stockpile, the sunset provision. Now suddenly no one's talking about the sunset provision. The fact that after 10 or 15 years, any restrictions that are put on Iran will be lifted. What's going on with that? Just 3 days ago, that was a sticking point. Has it been resolved? How has it been resolved? In other words, the issues that are on the table and not resolved yet go in all directions. The concessions that we've seen on the part of the P5+1, on the part of the Obama administration, go in all directions. And all of this cannot but lead us to the conclusion that what is going to be agreed will be a bad deal. And it will be a deal that will leave Iran at the threshold of a military nuclear capability. And this is bad news, and I'll just add one sentence. Please. The P5+1 know it. Okay? They know what's going on, but they want to push this through. And this is probably the most disturbing element of all.
Tal, I want to ask you, when you say the day after, if we're listening to Emily, to Dr. Landau, and we're listening to, the rumor and supposition that we're getting out of that, but what can, let's say Congress is out of the play. Netanyahu loses that card at this point. The day after is what for Israel? Are there contingency plans? Is Israel going to,
Well, since nothing is over till it's over, then Israel will continue with its mode of action, which is meeting with their counterparts in the P5+1, trying to influence a deal. If you ask Israeli officials, there has been an Israeli influence on some of the elements of the deal. But I think just to add to what Dr. Landau said, we didn't talk about the slogan Netanyahu said yesterday about the axis of Iran, Lausanne, Yemen. So Israel does feel that this agreement ignores Iran's action in the region, and the bad deal will be a bad deal not only for Israel, it's a bad deal for the region.
Definitely.
Netanyahu is the spokesman in this case, and Netanyahu has been under a lot of criticism, even in this studio, for the way he has conducted his battle against the Iranian nuclear program, but we do not know how this deal would have looked if he hadn't have conducted this very public and vocal objection to these whole negotiations. And I think that as this deal is emerging as a bad deal, many people will probably have to take back some of the things they said about Netanyahu in the whole way he acted against this deal, not in the past few weeks, but since these negotiations began.
And he's not the only one in the short time that, but nobody has been as vocal as him. But he's not the only one in the short time that we have. Ali, I want to turn to you because Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has announced yesterday that Arab leaders have agreed to form a joint military force. And this comes at the same time that the Saudi-led airstrike campaign targeting the Houthi Shia rebels in Yemen is continuing, but everybody's talking ground troops. This is a battle that is, okay, it's connected, it's interlaced. It's Saudi over Yemen, fighting to maintain Yemen in somewhat of a position where it's not connected to Iran. We're talking as Houthis. But
and this is a perspective I wanted to touch, Yael. First, two notes. Since the 12 or 13 years that the international community is negotiating with Iran about its nuclear capabilities, we are at the closest point that the two could meet and sign an agreement, as Tal said, whether it's going to be a framework agreement or another agreement.
It's as close as it's ever got.
It is the second point is that in the last weeks, the Saudis and the Israelis are working on their collaboration on almost every file in the region. Secret service officers from both sides are meeting. The Saudis are not denying reports in the Arab media about such meetings and such visits, even of Israeli officers, and this aims to the Iranians that yes, we are collaborating with the Israelis. And the third, what you mentioned, decision of the Arab League. We are not going to see a united Arab force tomorrow morning, but but we did not expect to see what we saw last week in Yemen, that the Saudis will lead an Arab coalition and will be at the closest point in this Cold War between Saudi Arabia and Iran, to say that the two words that Israel always used, the military option. The Saudis are saying that the military options is there now. Whether it's going to be, I don't see Iranian Saudis airplanes striking in Iran, but the Saudis send a clear message that they have many tools and cards to play with the
which is
Iranians.
They're also not being stopped by the United States, which raises the question. I mean, that's the big enigma here, because the United States also does not stop Saudi from trying to, you know, push Iran out of Yemen. An important point that I can say from what I heard from the Egyptians, that the Saudis are discussing with the Israelis a possibility of a mediation between Israel and Turkey. And this is important because Turkey hostility vis-a-vis Israel is not new. But if this triangle, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, have a common vision vis-a-vis the Iranian plans, they say that the day after will be much more interesting than we can imagine. Definitely for us living in the region. Tal Shalev, I-24 News diplomatic correspondent, Dr. Emily Landau, and Ali Wakad, I want to thank you all for being with us here today.